My name is Likeso Mahupulo. I'm Ritabile's father. Ritabile is actually my last born. It all started, what I can remember and remember clearly is what started in 2013, around September. I was actually trying to make preparations to go to Botswana. And suddenly Ritabile wakes up saying that I'm having a headache. And when she was talking of that headache, in the evening she says, switch off the lights. I cannot even, tolerate these lights. It's like my eyes can't accept the lights, and that worsens my headache. And I said, what's happening? She says, no, I don't know. We tried the praying, and as has always been the case, whenever we are faced with a problem, we contact our Prophet Chisa to pray for her, either by coming here or pray for her over the phone. And then we went for a few days, and she said, no, I'm feeling a bit better. That was towards the end of September. Then I left for Botswana. And when I got there, the situation got worse. Someday she phones me, she says, Dad, the doctor says I need an urgent operation. And I didn't know that that operation was going to be carried out in Harare. Then I said, okay, you go, I'll also make arrangements to come and see how you are coping. And then she went to Harare. She didn't tell me she was actually going to Harare. And I think one thing I've observed with her is when the going really gets tough, she thinks if she gives me the final details, I'll be more worried. Then she went to Harare, was still in Botswana, and then I tried contacting her. Then that's when she said, Dad, I'm in Harare. And then I tried again. She says, okay, I'm in an ambulance now, I'm going back to Bulawayo. And because of that, I couldn't really hear her. Then when she arrived here, we phoned from Harare, from Botswana, from Gaborone. And when she answered me, I just said, no, this is not the Ritabile I know. From the person's voice, you can tell that this person is not well. I got into the bus, came here, and arrived here around 9 a.m. And when I came here, she tells me that day was the first day she actually got out of bed. And when I sat here, she came out using a walker, four-wheeled walker. I said, Tabi, how are you feeling? She says, no, I'm feeling better. But when I was looking at her, the state she was in, I was really depressed. I said, good Lord, what does this really mean? Because I had left her in charge of the home, I had left her with her children, she's my last born, and that was, like, now what happens to these children? How do I look after these kids when they're so young, and now I don't have the energy to? Then I stayed with her here for quite some time, the men of God praying for her, encouraging us. The doctors actually had told her that most likely she would never walk again.
My name is Ritabile Mahupulo, and I would like to thank God for what He's done in my life. I would like to thank God for the word that we are taught here at Eagle Life, because that word has sustained me through some very difficult moments, some life-threatening moments. That word that we are taught here has kept me going. What happened before I came to Eagle Life, I was out in the wilderness, just about the age of most of you youth here. And I grew up in a family where we were not worshiping God much. And my parents were into visiting traditional healers, and not these ordinary mapo story, in these one-roomed houses, but actual spiritists who were using crystal balls and voodoo, Indian kind of people. So that basically gives you a background of the life that I grew up in. There was no God. God was just an emergency button that you would press when things are going wrong. Prayer was just reciting the Lord's Prayer and thanking God for the food, and that was that. I had no relationship whatsoever with God. And because of that, I just lived, life was just about living without any relationship with God, and a lot of mistakes were made along the way. A lot of seeds were planted along the way. And then in 2011, my mother fell sick. So someone from Eagle Life told me that there's a very highly anointed man of God here in Bulawayo called Prophet Blessing Chiza. So why don't you bring your mother here so that he can pray for her? My mom was in Botswana at that time. So I crossed with my mother on a Friday. And when we came here, Saturday, Prophet came to the hospital and he prayed for her. So my mother was deaf and blind and dumb. The only thing that she was doing was breathing. She couldn't talk, she couldn't hear, she was not responding to anything. But when Prophet came into the ward to see her, he recited a verse that she liked, that I shall not die, but I shall live to declare the works of the Lord. And then I saw my mother responding. She nodded her head and started smiling. And we were all shocked because she had gone for over 2 weeks not responding to anything. So that actually stirred something in me that, this man, what exactly is it about him? He's talking to my mother and my mother is responding. Then on Saturday afternoon, he sent Pastor Eddie and Pastor Ernest to pray for her. Sunday after service, Pastor Eddie and Pastor Ernest came to pray for her. But on Monday, as God willed, my mother passed away. But what I had seen happen while Prophet was praying for her, it stirred something in me that made me curious, like what exactly is happening in this church. I had a lot of doubt about men of God because I'd seen a lot of men of God doing a lot of ungodly things. So to me, these people who were standing on the pulpit, it was all fake. That's what I believed, that they were faking it because that's the exposure that I had, right? So now I became curious, and after the burial of my mother, I attended the first service at Royal Hotel, and the Archbishop was preaching. And as he was preaching, it was as if someone had actually given him a book of my life, because everything that he touched on actually related to me. And that made me even more curious now to continue attending services until October 2011. I got born again here at Eagle Life, and from there became a full-time member. Now, when I became a member of Eagle Life, things started happening in my life. Not good things, unfortunately. I started developing a lot of attacks. I lost my car. A tree just fell on my car. Just after I got out of the car, a tree fell on my car and crushed it. My business started going down, really down. My health started deteriorating. I was receiving all sorts of attacks in my health. I had problems with my leg, problems with nerves being trapped. I was told I had to go for operations. I ruptured a blood vessel in my head, had to have a shunt inserted. These are the tablets that I've been taking from as far back as 2013 when I fell ill. What happened was sometime in September, I think it must have been the 17th of September in 2013. It was during the service, Sunday service. I developed something like a thunderclap headache. It was just a sudden headache whilst I was in church, and it kept getting stronger and stronger, so I had to leave church early. I came home, and when I got here, the pain was really bad, right? So I went straight to bed, and from that day on, each day, the pain kept on getting worse.
And it reached a point where I couldn't look at the light. Right? I was spending most of the time in bed with a blanket over my head because any kind of light would cause me severe pain that would shoot down the head, right down the spine. So I went to see a doctor, specialist, Dr. Ngovo, at his surgery. Right? So he ordered some tests to be done. And one of the tests that he did was a spinal tap, lumbar puncture. So when they did the spinal tap, when they drew the fluid, there was some blood that was in the fluid, right? And when they saw that blood, that's when he told me that something has gone terribly wrong. And I was sent for a CT scan at the X-ray center at Lancet House there. So when the result of the CT scan came out, it showed that I actually ruptured a blood vessel in my head. And that's when he told me that it was an emergency and I had to be sent to a neurosurgeon in Harare immediately. So I was moved from here, Bulawayo, to Harare by ambulance to be seen by a neurologist, Dr. Makarabi. And when I got there, he explained to me that they were going to insert something called a shunt into my head.
The topic we're going to focus on here is hydrocephalus, literally water in head. Hydrocephalus is a very important medical condition that can affect any one of us at virtually any time in life, since when we are still a tiny fetus inside the uterus until late in our lives as a consequence of the process of aging. But to understand what hydrocephalus is, how it's treated, and what are its main complications, we have to talk a little about some details of the anatomy and the physiology of the central nervous system. Here in this drawing, we see a lateral view of the brain. This is the internal surface of the right hemisphere, and here, in darker gray, is the corpus callosum, that is a bunch of fibers that connect the left hemisphere to the right one. This structure is the cerebellum, and this other one is the medulla going downwards into the vertebral canal. Now, when I press this button, the ventricular system is displayed in blue. It's a set of interconnected cavities where the cerebrospinal fluid is produced and circulates in order to protect and nourish our central nervous system. Note that the lateral ventricle is the bigger one, and it's connected to the third ventricle through a narrow orifice that we call foramen of Monro. The third ventricle is connected to the fourth one, located just below, through a short and narrow canal called aqueduct of Sylvius. I want you to note that on the inferior portion of the fourth ventricle, there is a set of small orifices through which the cerebrospinal fluid can leave the ventricular system to reach the external surface of cerebellum, medulla, and brain. This is going to be very important to understand the onset of hydrocephalus. Okay, now let's go back to the navigation bar, and I press the next button. What happens? A yellow arrow appears, and this yellow arrow is going to show us the pathway of the liquor or cerebrospinal fluid inside the ventricles. Let's see it. The liquid is produced by glandular structures called choroid plexus that we can see here inside the lateral, the third, and the fourth ventricle. This liquid is continuously produced, as well as the absorption that occurs mostly along this large vein located at the top of the internal surface of the cranium. So the liquid must pass from one chamber to another until it reaches the outlet orifices located down here to finally be absorbed by that large vein. Now you can understand what will happen if there is an obstacle to the free passage of the liquid. And that's what I do when I press this button. Take a look. I created an obstacle, and the liquid starts to accumulate inside the ventricular system, compressing the brain against the bones of the skull. It causes a dramatic situation that requires immediate medical intervention to prevent brain damage. And what can we do to remedy the problem? That's what we'll see now by pressing the next button. The most common neurosurgical treatment is the installation of a flexible tube or shunt that will drain the excess liquid away from the brain. Most commonly, the new place to where the liquid is sent is the abdominal cavity of the patient. Now pay attention to this detail. What you see here is a valvular mechanism that is placed in the tube to make the liquid flow only in one direction, away from the brain and not backward, what is responsible for a fundamental role in the relief and control of the intracranial pressure. But, unhappily, there may be some complications with the drainage system, and the most common one is the occlusion of the tube by blood clots, for example. And that's what we're going to see by pressing the next button. Take a look. Here you can see that the blood clot has formed and clings to the tube. It makes the drainage of the liquid slow down till it stops completely, and as a consequence of that, the liquid starts to accumulate and compresses the brain against the bones of the cranium once more. Of course, this is a very important medical event that demands for neurosurgical intervention to evaluate the problem, and in most cases it's going to be necessary an immediate replacement of the defective drainage system. But I must make an important observation at this point, that despite the severity of the medical condition, there are many examples of patients around the world that live a good life with their shunts without the recurrence of complications such as this one that we have just described. So in a few minutes we were able to understand what is the ventricular system, how the cerebrospinal fluid is produced and circulates inside these cavities that we all have inside our brains, and what happens in case of an obstruction to the free flow of the liquid. Then we saw how we overcome the problem with the installation of a shunt, and finally, which one is the main complication of the procedure.
So they inserted a shunt into my head, and so the shunt is just a needle-like, very small thing. They drill a hole into your skull and insert that, then they attach it to a tube that runs under the skin into the stomach. So it will be draining fluid, because what they said had happened was there was excess fluid that was being produced, spinal fluid, cerebral spinal fluid. And normally when it happens in a child, it causes the head to swell, that hydrocephalus. But now when you're an adult, your skull is hard, so it doesn't expand like that of a child. So all that pressure just builds in. And in most cases, those are the headaches that kill people. You just hear someone saying they had a severe headache and the next thing they were gone because vessels rupture from the pressure. But miraculously, during that time when I had the headache, Prophet was praying for me. He'd come here and pray for me. The pastors were coming, and my family fellowship were coming, were praying over that. So that actually sustained me, that it didn't become fatal. I was in pain, yes, but I was still alive. So I got there and the operation was done, and I remember even the doctor who did the operation told me that you should thank your God. It's a miracle that you survived this and that you actually lived this long, because this normally it kills people on the spot. Because when the vessel ruptures, it bleeds, and it bleeds into the brain, and that's fatal. But what happened with this vessel, it ruptured and then it sealed. I don't know how, that's God. It ruptured and then it's sealed. So now after the shunt had been inserted, unfortunately the effect of that, my whole left side became affected. So I was partially paralyzed on the left, the hand and the leg. So after being discharged, I came back home here now with the problem of paralysis, and I was in bed. I couldn't move this hand, I couldn't move the leg. I had to be assisted in and out of bed, and I was having bed baths done. And the man of God came, he kept praying for me, and he kept on assuring me that it was a temporary thing. I would get back on my feet, right? And sure to his word, gradually I started getting the feeling back into my system, slowly but surely. Feelings started coming back. And then now the next thing that happened, I started swelling. My leg just started swelling. And when I went for my routine check with the doctor, he told me that he was suspecting that there were some clots that were developing on the leg. So I was sent for a scan, and surely the scan was done, and they discovered 2 clots, right, in 2 of the main veins of the leg. So I was readmitted into Mater Dei Hospital. That was in December, and I spent virtually the whole of December in hospital under treatment. I was getting blood thinning injections.
And I was wondering, she was the one running the business, and she's now disabled. She doesn't have a car. The car was crushed by a tree that fell in the city center. And I was just wondering how life was going to be. Then she got a bit better. Then from there came now this issue she was explaining of having the blood needing thinning. Those are some of the things I never understood because I've never really had health problems myself. And she would be going to see Dr. Ndlovu time and again, and he would be trying this and that. And now there came the problem of now the swelling of legs. You sit, you can actually see each day the legs and the feet are getting bigger and bigger. She gets there, she's told, no, let's detain you for 2 or 3 days and observe what happens. She says, no, I can't take being in hospital again. I better go home. She comes here, 2-3 days, the situation is worse. And it continued like that and continued. Then I got to a point where I was wondering whether she would really make it in life. I remember 2013, the whole of December, she was virtually away from here. And I remember on Christmas Day, I was all by myself. We were just thinking, what's going on? She was at Mater Dei Hospital. She had been admitted. And I'd be going there, I see her, I meet some people. Well, I don't know many people in life, but they would recognize me because they would be knowing, this is Ritabile's father. I'd be going there to see her, and I find, although she says I'm feeling better, the leg is raised so that the swelling doesn't get worse, but you just feel as a parent that no, this is not the kind of life I'm used to. The business virtually came to a standstill because she was the one running it. And it meant actually financially now you are struggling. And you start wondering now, how do we survive in this situation? But as God would have it, He saw us through. And then as she said, when they started talking of the heart now being the problem and the palpitations, that's when my mother-in-law, her mother's mother, passed away in Lesotho. Her mother came from Lesotho. And I said to her, no, look here. The situation we are in, it was the financial situation, it was also that my vehicle is in Botswana. It wasn't doing well. And when there's death, it's something like an emergency, you have to get there. That's when we suggested that she go there herself. And she went there. I would always be trying to trace her, to find out her health condition and also how she's coping there.